Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you on a quieter journey through feudal Japan. A path walked by few, celebrated by less. The path of the Ronin, a samurai without a master. Once, there were your banners, your katana at your hip, the honor of your daimyo flowing in your veins. But fortunes shift, loyalties are tested. And when your master falls or banishes you, what remains of your identity? This is the story of Takeshi. Born into service, trained in Bushido from boyhood, following the seasons of his lord's court, he believed that loyalty was all that gave his life meaning. But then one day the daimyo fell in battle, or perhaps through political intrigue, whispers of betrayal, shifting alliances. Takeshi's world collapsed. He is declared a Ronin. Tonight we will walk with him, feel the weight of his sword, taste the bitter chill of dawn spent without a roof, hear the echoes of how society looks at a man unmoored. We will follow him through rice paddies, mountain passes, village ways, snow in winter and heat in summer, hunger and fear, but also moments of fierce beauty, cherry blossoms, the smell of tea, the quiet flicker of lanterns. Close your eyes. Breathe in the scent of pine and smoke. Listen to the quiet scrape of wooden sandals on dirt roads. Let the story settle around you like a cloak in winter. Chapter 1. The Fall of a Daimyo, the Birth of a Ronin. The morning was cold. A mist drifted across the rice paddies outside Takeshi's lord's castle. His breath rose in little clouds. He had sat through many dawns, sharpening his blade, polishing his armor, bowing before his daimyo. But on this morning, he sensed something different. Rumors had spread through the messenger pigeons, taxes overdue, rival clans stirring, the daimyo's advisor poisoned by jealousy. Takeshi rode with a small retinue to the border to meet traders, secure supplies, ever vigilant. But loyalty, it seems, is fragile. Steel swords are easier to wield in battle than in politics. The lord had been betrayed. Ambassadors of a neighboring clan had slipped into his court, whispering promises of alliance, threats. The lord's guards had faltered. In the last stand, Takeshi had fought. His blade sang in the moonlight, but numbers overwhelmed loyalty. The castle walls fell. The daimyo died with honor. Takeshi, badly wounded, was among few who escaped. Without his lord, without his home, Takeshi stands in the ruins. Samurai serve a master. Without that master, they are rootless. Takeshi feels the shame. Once marched with pride, once held land, now wanderer. Others call him Ronin, drifter, masterless. Some bow politely, others avert their eyes. He clasps his sword, but its weight feels both familiar and empty. The days that follow are months of wandering. Cold nights under incomplete roofs, meals of rice broth, occasionally salted fish. Sometimes he helps farmers in exchange for shelter. Sometimes he trains alone beside rivers, practicing kata, repeating vows of Bushido to himself. Legends cross his path. The story of the 47 Ronin who avenged their lord, tales of Ronin who became revered teachers, others who died trying to sell their blade, betraying their code. Takeshi hears these legends. Some inspire him, others haunt him. He learns humility. He learns that honor is not always applause, that dignity can survive poverty. He learns that loneliness can sharpen the soul as bitter cold sharpens steel. Chapter 2. Life as a Ronin. Hunger, stigma, and the long road. The road stretched out before Takeshi like a scar across the land. Dust rose with each step of his straw sandals clinging to his hakama. His katana, once gleaming with the polish of service, now bore faint scratches, reminders of skirmishes and of nights spent leaning against stone walls instead of in the warmth of barracks. As the days passed into weeks, Takeshi came to know the life of the Ronin, a life without certainty. In the villages, whispers followed him. Children stared at the two swords, symbols of the samurai class, though his tattered clothing betrayed his fallen status. Farmers offered him rice only cautiously. To be a samurai without a master was to be an exile within one's own class. The social order of Japan in the Edo period was strict. Samurai served daimyo. Daimyo served the shogun. Beneath them were peasants, artisans, and merchants. Each had their place. But the Ronin had slipped through the cracks, once high, now rootless. Some villagers pitied him, imagining their own fate if the rice harvest failed or if bandits came. Others feared him, thinking a masterless warrior must be desperate, perhaps dangerous. There were tales of Ronin who hired out their swords as mercenaries or even as criminals. To harbor such a man was to invite trouble. Takeshi felt these eyes upon him like arrows. In his heart, he carried the shame, yet in his spirit, a quiet ember of pride remained. He was still samurai. He had sworn to the way of the warrior. The world might call him broken, but he still breathed honor in each step. The greatest foe was not ridicule, but hunger. Without stipends from his lord's treasury, without land to farm, Takeshi faced the emptiness of his belly each day. He wandered from town to town, offering his skill as a teacher of swordsmanship. Some dojos welcomed him for a time, curious about his techniques. Students would bow before him, their bamboo swords clacking against his blade as he demonstrated kata. But coin was scarce and rivalry among schools fierce. Soon, he would be asked to move on. At other times, he worked among peasants. His hands, trained to wield steel, grew calloused from pulling weeds, repairing roofs, or hauling water from rivers. Payment was meager, a bowl of millet, perhaps dried radish, maybe a scrap of fish if fortune smiled. There were nights when Takeshi went without food. The gnawing emptiness kept company only by the sound of crickets and the rustle of pine trees. Hunger taught him humility more than any duel could. Travel in Japan was never easy. Roads were often narrow dirt paths winding through forests and mountains. Bandits prowled, preying upon travelers. Though Takeshi carried his swords, he avoided conflict when he could. Each fight risked injury, and an injured Ronin could easily become a forgotten corpse on the roadside. Rain soaked him often. His straw cloak, woven from reeds, grew heavy with water. Winter brought snow that bit through sandals, numbing his toes. Summer brought relentless heat, sweat soaking his robes, the buzzing of insects endless. At roadside inns, the keepers demanded payment before offering rice or a mat to sleep upon. Too often, Takeshi's pouch held only emptiness. He would bow, step back into the night, and sleep beneath shrines or in abandoned sheds. Legends whispered that fox spirits watched such travelers, leading them astray. Takeshi sometimes wondered, when the forest paths twisted and the moon hid itself, if such tales were true. Yet not all was hardship. In small temples, Buddhist monks sometimes offered him food in exchange for sweeping floors or chopping wood. They asked nothing of his past, only that he sit with them in meditation. The silence of the zendo soothed his restless spirit. One monk, old and bent like a willow, spoke softly to him. "Masterless you may be, but the sword can still serve compassion. Protect the weak, teach discipline. Your path is not ended, it has only changed." These words settled in Takeshi's heart, for though he had lost his lord, perhaps he had not lost his purpose. Around the fires of travelers, Takeshi heard stories of the 47 Ronin who avenged their daimyo's death, striking fear into corrupt officials, of lone wanderers who became folk heroes, defending villages from bandits, of others who succumbed to despair, drinking away their days, their swords pawned for rice wine. Each tale was a mirror, showing Takeshi what he could become, for good or for ill. Night was the hardest. As the stars scattered across the sky, Takeshi lay awake, the absence of comrades cutting deeper than hunger. Once he had laughed with brothers in arms, shared sake, sparred until sweat poured. Now, silence answered him. Sometimes he spoke aloud to his fallen lord, promising that he would not dishonor his name. Other nights, he whispered sutras, seeking peace. The wind moved through bamboo groves like the sigh of ghosts. Takeshi wondered if his ancestors watched him, if they judged his wandering or pitied him. A Ronin's life was a paradox, despised yet feared, free yet trapped, alive yet haunted. Each day demanded endurance, each night demanded courage. But still, Takeshi walked. His sandals wore thin, his robes frayed, but his spirit endured. The road stretched onward, and with each step, he learned anew what it meant to live without a master, and to master himself instead. Chapter 3. Legends and Shadows, Other Paths of the Ronin. The road does not only test the body, it fills the mind with echoes. As Takeshi journeyed, he heard stories carried by travelers, monks, and merchants. Some were grounded in truth, others grew taller with each retelling. For a Ronin, these tales were more than entertainment. They were warnings, mirrors, and sometimes lanterns in the dark. One name surfaced again and again: Miyamoto Musashi. Musashi was born in the late 1500s and lived much of his life as a Ronin. He fought more than 60 duels, never once defeated. Unlike many who clung to the traditions of a single school, Musashi created his own path. His two-sword style, one long blade, one short, became legendary. Merchants in tea-houses whispered of his duels, fought at dawn by rivers or in quiet fields. They said he sometimes arrived late on purpose, unsettling his opponents. Others claimed he fought with wooden swords, yet still triumphed. But Musashi was not only a warrior. In his later years, he turned to writing and art. His book, The Book of Five Rings, described not just fighting but philosophy, the balance of earth, water, fire, wind, and emptiness. He painted ink sketches of birds and landscapes, calm and delicate, so unlike the clash of steel. To Takeshi, Musashi's story was proof that even a masterless man could carve a lasting legacy, not by serving a lord, but by mastering himself. Another name whispered along the roads was Yagyu Jubei. He was said to be the greatest swordsman of the Yagyu clan, yet much of his life is wrapped in mystery. Some tales said he vanished from court for over a decade, wandering Japan as a Ronin. Others claimed he studied under mountain hermits, perfecting secret techniques. When he returned, it was as if he had stepped out of legend itself. He carried an eye patch, his presence fierce yet quiet. Poets wrote verses about his lone figure, crossing bridges at dusk, his blade at his side like a silent companion. Whether all of it was true or not, the image of Jubei lingered in the minds of common folk, a Ronin not of disgrace, but of mystery and mastery. Not all Ronin became famous for duels. Some found new life as teachers. In villages, a Ronin might set up a small dojo, passing down the sword arts to farmers' sons. Payment came in rice or cloth, not in coin, but it gave both the Ronin and the villagers a sense of pride. The farmers learned discipline and defense. The Ronin regained purpose. Travelers told of men who carried bundles of bamboo swords, offering to teach children in exchange for a meal. Others became protectors of small towns, training peasants to resist bandits. Though few of these men's names survived history, their influence rippled quietly, like stones dropped into a pond. Takeshi thought often of these figures. Perhaps his path, too, might turn toward teaching. Perhaps his blade could serve the living, not just memory. Some Ronin laid down their swords entirely. Without a master, they turned to poetry, painting, or calligraphy. One story told of a Ronin who, after years of wandering, entered a temple garden. He left his katana at the gate, never to reclaim it. Instead, he took up the brush, writing haiku that captured the stillness of nature. The cry of cicadas, the fall of cherry blossoms, the hush of snow on pine. Another tale spoke of a Ronin painter who traveled from village to village. He painted scenes of mountains and rivers onto sliding doors, accepting rice as payment. In his art, people found serenity. His sword remained sheathed, gathering dust, but his brush kept him alive. For Takeshi, these tales opened a gentler horizon. Perhaps the way of the warrior could be lived without the clash of blades. Not all Ronin tales were about men. Some were about spirits. Folk in mountain villages told of the Tengu, long-nosed, goblin-like beings who lived in forests. They were said to test or even train wandering swordsmen, teaching secret techniques in exchange for years of service. A Ronin who disappeared into the mountains might return with uncanny skill, his eyes distant, as if still haunted by the creature's gaze. Other stories told of Ronin who met wandering monks. These monks, sometimes humble, sometimes strange, would challenge a warrior not with steel, but with riddles and philosophy. "What is strength without compassion?" they asked. "What is honor if it blinds you to mercy?" Some Ronin laughed, others listened, and their lives changed. At night, as the wind hissed through bamboo, Takeshi thought of these tales. Were they warnings or promises? The line between legend and life blurred easily when one traveled alone. There were also darker stories, not of honor, but of ruin. Tavern keepers spoke of Ronin who sank into gambling dens, selling their swords for sake. Others became bodyguards for criminals, their blades used to enforce debts or silence rivals. These men were feared, but not respected. Their names vanished quickly, their graves unmarked. Takeshi listened to these accounts with quiet unease. Each path was a choice. To wander did not mean to lose himself, but the danger was always there. One evening, Takeshi sat by a roadside fire, listening to merchants share songs of Musashi and whispers of Jubei. The flames danced, shadows flickered, and for a moment, the stories felt alive. He realized that a Ronin's life was not only shaped by hunger or exile, it was shaped by the stories that clung to him the ones people told about those like him, and the one he was still writing with each weary step. As sleep came upon him beneath the stars, Takeshi thought, perhaps a Ronin does not need a master to give him meaning. Perhaps the meaning lies in the path itself, in the legends we leave behind, whether they are sung, painted, or whispered. The road was still long, but with each legend he heard, Takeshi carried a little more light into the shadows. Chapter 4. Hunger, Cold, and the Harsh Nature of Japan. The sword was heavy at his side, yet the weight that pressed most upon Takeshi was not steel, but hunger. The road through Japan was long, and though it wound through fertile valleys, dense forests, and mountain passes, a masterless man could not always claim the land's abundance. Each season offered both beauty and cruelty, and the Ronin knew them all. It was early autumn when Takeshi passed through rice country. Fields stretched out like mirrors, reflecting the sky. Farmers bent low, cutting stalks, their hands moving in rhythm, water soaking their legs. The harvest was rich, but not for him. Rice belonged to the peasants, yet much of it went upward, to taxes, to the lord, to the storehouses. For a wandering Ronin, scraps were the most he could hope for. Sometimes a farmer's wife offered him a small bundle of millet or barley, moved by pity. Other times, doors closed before he could even bow. A hungry samurai was an unsettling sight. At night, the pangs gnawed deeper than any blade. He chewed bitter roots, boiled wild greens, or caught fish with his bare hands in streams. Survival was not a duel of swords. It was a duel with the belly. When winter came, the true test began. Snow fell thick in the mountains. Villages huddled together, smoke rising from chimneys, but Takeshi was often outside those walls. He wrapped himself in a straw raincoat, the fibers stiff with frost. His breath clouded in the air, his sandals soaked through with ice. The night stretched long, his only warmth a dwindling fire, or the thin embrace of a woolen blanket. In the stillness, he heard the creak of frozen bamboo, like old bones breaking. Fox tracks crossed the snow, vanishing into the woods. Some said foxes were tricksters, spirits wearing fur. In hunger and cold, a man might believe it. There were times when his hand shook so badly that he could barely hold his sword. Yet to set it aside would be to surrender his last fragment of identity. So he endured. Spring brought no mercy. Rains soaked the roads until they turned into rivers of mud. Takeshi trudged knee-deep through sludge, sandals slipping, robes plastered to his skin. Villagers dug ditches to drain their fields, carrying water in endless buckets. For the Ronin, there was little refuge. Inns demanded coin, and without it he crouched beneath shrines or old trees, listening to the drum of rain upon leaves. The dampness lingered in his bones. He coughed, feverish, yet still he walked. To stop was to surrender, and surrender was death. Summer, too, brought trials. The air grew thick, heavy with the drone of cicadas. Sweat soaked his clothing, salt burning his eyes. Food spoiled quickly, and rivers shrank under the blazing sun. He moved through fields where farmers bent beneath the heat, their skin darkened by labor. They worked from dawn to dusk, their endurance rivaling that of any warrior. Takeshi felt respect for them. They fought not with blades, but with patience. The summer storms came suddenly. Thunder rolled like distant drums of war, lightning splitting the sky. In such moments, Takeshi remembered battles of his past, yet now the only enemy was weather itself. Nature was harsh, but people, too, could be unkind. Hungry and tired, Takeshi once begged at a gate for a bowl of rice. The farmer shouted, calling him a stray dog. Children threw stones until he moved on. At other times, compassion appeared. A temple monk gave him a seat by the fire, rice porridge steaming in a wooden bowl. "Even the strong require kindness," the monk said. "Take this warmth and carry it onward." The road was a balance of rejection and grace, as unpredictable as the seasons. Through it all, Takeshi came to see Japan itself as a teacher. The mountains taught endurance, their slopes reminding him that strength is not in speed, but in steady steps. The rivers taught impermanence, flowing ever onward, carrying away both sorrow and joy. The forests taught silence, their shadows a refuge for meditation. The fields taught humility, for no warrior could eat without the labor of peasants. Every hardship became a lesson. Hunger taught gratitude. Cold taught resilience. Heat taught patience. And the road itself taught humility. At night, when exhaustion finally pressed him into sleep, dreams softened the edges. In dreams, he saw himself again in his Lord's service, armor polished, banners high. He heard the clash of training swords, the laughter of comrades. But dawn always came, and with it the truth. Yet strangely, the dreams did not sadden him. They reminded him of who he had been and of who he still might become. The harshness of Japan's seasons was relentless. Yet Takeshi learned to see in it a mirror of life. Just as rice grew only through the cycle of water, sun, and storm, so too did a Ronin's spirit grow through trial. The world tested him, not with battlefields and orders, but with emptiness, with loneliness, with the bite of cold and the hunger of the belly. These were duels as real as any clash of steel, and in surviving them, Takeshi understood something deeper, that honor was not only in serving a master. Sometimes honor was simply in enduring. Chapter 5. Crossroads of Fate. Meetings with monks, merchants, and wandering souls. The road of the Ronin was long and empty, but it was never entirely without company. Travelers crossed paths like drifting clouds. Some offered food, some shared words, and some left only fleeting impressions, like footprints soon washed away by rain. Takeshi learned that each meeting was its own kind of lesson. One morning, Takeshi reached a river swollen from spring rain. The bridge had washed away, leaving only rope and broken planks. As he considered how to cross, he noticed a monk seated calmly on a rock, his robes faded with age, his staff resting at his side. The monk greeted him without surprise, as if expecting him. "You stand at the river," he said, "but the crossing is not the challenge. The challenge is to accept the flow." The words seemed simple, yet they lingered. Together they found a shallow ford downstream, and the monk led the way, water rushing around his ankles. On the far bank, he shared a meal of rice balls wrapped in bamboo leaves. Before they parted, the monk bowed. "A masterless man is not without purpose," he said. "Your purpose walks with you, even when unseen." The monk vanished into the trees, leaving Takeshi with food in his belly and a thought to carry onward. Another day, Takeshi encountered a line of merchants. Their oxen pulled carts heavy with goods, silk, lacquerware, salt, and rice wine. Guards walked beside them, spears upright, eyes wary. At first, they eyed the Ronin with suspicion. A lone swordsman without a master was a threat. But when Takeshi offered to walk alongside them for protection, they accepted. For 2 days, he guarded their path. At night, they camped together. Around the fire, merchants told stories of far-off markets, bustling towns, and coin exchanged faster than blades. One merchant, gray-haired and kindly, asked Takeshi, "Why not sell your sword in service to trade? The road is safer with men like you." Takeshi shook his head. "To sell the sword without honor is to sell myself." The merchant nodded, though his eyes carried both respect and pity. Before they parted, he pressed a small pouch of dried fish into Takeshi's hand. "Even honor must eat," he said. In the mountains, Takeshi once came upon a humble hut. A family lived there, father, mother, and 2 children. Though poor, they welcomed him, offering a bowl of thin barley gruel. The children stared wide-eyed at his sword. To them, he was a figure out of storybooks. They asked if he had slain dragons, if he had fought for emperors. Takeshi smiled faintly. He told them only that his sword's greatest duty was to remain sheathed, for peace was the true victory. That night, he slept on straw beside their hearth, listening to the quiet breaths of the children. In the morning, he cut firewood as thanks. The father bowed deeply, though Takeshi felt it was he who owed gratitude. He left them with a blessing, his heart lighter than it had been for weeks. On another road, Takeshi met a blind musician carrying a shamisen. The man played beneath a cherry tree in bloom, the petals falling like snow. His voice was gentle, telling old tales in song, of warriors and lovers, of betrayal and faith. The music wrapped around Takeshi like a cloak, softening the ache of his feet and the hunger in his belly. When the song ended, the musician said, "The world remembers not the blade, but the story. Walk so that your story may be sung." Takeshi gave a respectful bow, though he had nothing to offer in return. Yet in truth, the gift had already been given. Not all encounters brought hope. One evening, Takeshi saw another Ronin slumped by the roadside. His robes were ragged, his sword rusted, his eyes dull. The man begged for sake, his voice cracked with thirst. "We are the same," he rasped, "dogs without masters." Takeshi offered water instead, but the man spat, cursing the world, cursing the lords who abandoned him, cursing himself. Soon he staggered away, lost in shadow. That night, Takeshi could not sleep easily. The sight of the broken Ronin haunted him. He knew he walked only a few steps away from that same fate. To give in to despair was to die before death. Each meeting shaped Takeshi. From the monk he learned patience, from the merchants, practicality, from the peasant family, kindness, from the musician, the power of story, from the broken Ronin, the edge of despair. The road was not only a path across Japan, it was a path inward, each traveler a mirror of what he could become, for better or worse. One evening, as the sun set over a field of golden grass, Takeshi paused. He thought of all the faces he had met. Brief as they were, they lingered like lanterns in the twilight. He realized that even a life without a master could still be filled with connections. Perhaps they were fleeting, but each one left a mark. And as the stars lit the sky, Takeshi whispered to himself. A Ronin is not alone, unless he chooses to be. Chapter 6. The Quiet Temples and the Search for Peace. The road wound upward into the hills. Pines whispered in the wind, and the air grew cooler. Takeshi's feet ached from endless miles, yet something in the silence of the mountains offered relief. Ahead, temple bells rang, slow, resonant notes drifting through the valleys like waves upon water. Temples had always been sanctuaries for the weary. To a Ronin, they were more than places of worship. They were spaces where hunger, shame, and memory might be set aside, if only for a time. Takeshi climbed narrow steps carved into stone. Moss grew thick along the edges, and small statues of Jizo, guardian of travelers, stood with red bibs placed by villagers. Their faces, though worn by rain, seemed to smile in welcome. At the gate, two guardian figures, fierce wooden deities, glared outward, protecting the sacred grounds. Passing between them, Takeshi felt both small and cleansed, as if leaving behind the dust of the road. Inside the temple courtyard, monks moved in silence. Their robes swayed softly, sandals whispering on stone. They carried buckets of water, swept fallen leaves, or tended to gardens where lotus flowers bloomed in still ponds. One monk, older than the rest, bowed to Takeshi. He asked for no explanation, no account of his life. Instead, he led him to a place by the fire where a pot of miso soup steamed. Over the meal, the monk spoke gently. "The sword cuts only once," he said, "but the heart cuts 1,000 times. Which is the greater burden, do you think?" Takeshi lowered his gaze. He knew the answer without words. At night, the monks gathered to chant. Their voices rose and fell, deep and steady, filling the hall with a rhythm like the ocean's tide. Candles flickered against golden statues of the Buddha, their light soft and wavering. Takeshi knelt among them, the sound wrapping around him. He did not fully understand every verse, yet the tone soothed him. The chanting blurred into breath, and breath blurred into stillness. For the first time in many weeks, he felt not like a wandering shadow, but like a man who belonged, if only in silence. Days passed slowly at the temple. Takeshi helped with simple chores, carrying firewood, drawing water, mending sandals. In return, he shared small pieces of his skill, showing younger monks how to hold a staff or steady their stance. One morning, while sweeping the garden, he asked the old monk, "What does a man without a master seek?" The monk replied, "He seeks himself. And once he finds himself, he discovers there was no need to search." The words lingered, carried by the wind through rustling bamboo. Within the temple stood a small library. Shelves of scrolls and texts written by hand rested there. Takeshi, though not a scholar, traced the brushstrokes with reverence. Some told of warriors who laid down their swords to study calligraphy. Others described poets who found enlightenment in the sound of a single bird's cry. He realized then that the temple was not merely a refuge from hunger, it was a refuge from the constant weight of identity. Here, he was not a Ronin or a samurai. He was simply a man, breathing like any other. After several days, Takeshi knew he could not remain. The road called him onward, and the monks did not hold him back. Before leaving, the old monk placed a mala of wooden prayer beads into his hand. "Carry this," he said, "not to ward off demons, but to remind you that every step is already sacred." Takeshi bowed low. his forehead to the floor before stepping once more onto the dusty path. As the temple bells faded behind him, Takeshi thought of what he had gained. Not wealth, not power, but a measure of calm. The road would still be harsh, yet he carried now a quieter strength. Perhaps peace was not something to be found at the end of the journey. Perhaps it was something glimpsed in fleeting moments, in chanting voices, in lotus ponds, in silence under the trees. The Ronin walked on, but his heart was lighter. Chapter 7. Shadows of the City. Danger, temptation, and survival. The countryside was harsh, but it was honest. Hunger came from empty fields. Cold came from the wind, and danger came from nature itself. In the city, however, hardship wore many masks. For a Ronin, a city was both refuge and trap. After weeks on the road, Takeshi reached the gates of a castle town. High wooden walls surrounded the settlement, guarded by samurai in service to the local lord. Their eyes lingered on him, on the 2 swords at his side, on the wear of his robes. A Ronin was no rarity, but neither was he welcomed. Too many had turned to crime, too many had caused trouble. Yet the guards allowed him through, and soon the noise of the town washed over him. Merchants calling, children laughing, the ring of blacksmiths' hammers, the shuffle of sandals across packed dirt streets. The city breathed with life, and within it, Takeshi felt both small and wary. The first temptations were simple: food and drink. Izakaya taverns lined the streets, their lanterns glowing warmly, their scents of grilled fish and rice wine drifting into the night. A bowl of noodles, a cup of sake, they called to him. But his pouch was nearly empty. What little coin he had earned from guarding merchants on the road slipped quickly through his fingers. Beyond food lay deeper temptations. Gambling dens hid in alleys, their floors scattered with dice and cards. Prostitutes called softly from behind paper screens. Thieves watched with sharp eyes, looking for easy prey. The city offered abundance, but at a cost that stripped more than coin. It stripped dignity, honor, and sometimes life itself. One night, Takeshi was approached by a man in fine robes, his arms tattooed with waves and dragons. He smiled, offering sake. Behind him stood others, equally adorned, equally confident. "We need men like you," the leader said. "Strong arms, sharp blades. Work for us, and you'll never starve again." They were the Yakuza, organized gangs that thrived where law faltered. They offered protection, coin, and companionship, but their paths were soaked in blood and crime. Takeshi bowed politely but declined. The leader's smile faded. "Pride is a poor meal," he warned. "When hunger bites again, remember our door." Takeshi walked away, the echo of their laughter heavy on his back. He knew many Ronin had taken that offer. He prayed he would never be one of them. In a narrow street, Takeshi found a group of Ronin sitting in the shadows. Their robes were tattered, their eyes sharp. They drank from cheap bottles, laughing bitterly. One recognized him as a fellow wanderer. "Come, brother. Sit. Forget the world with us." He sat for a while, sharing their fire. They spoke of lords who betrayed them, of battles lost, of families left behind. Some cursed their fate, others dreamed of revenge. As the night deepened, quarrels rose. One drew his sword, drunken and reckless. Takeshi stepped back, refusing the fight. He left them behind, their anger spilling into the darkness. Not all Ronin were noble. Some had become wolves. He walked on, alone but resolute. Yet not all was shadow. In one district he found a small tea house run by a widow. She offered him tea, though he had little to pay. "You look like my husband once did," she said softly. "He died in service. I cannot turn you away." In another quarter, a young apprentice asked shyly if Takeshi would show him how to hold a sword. Takeshi corrected his stance, steadying his grip. The boy bowed deeply, his eyes shining. Even in the city, kindness flickered like lanterns. Small, fragile, yet enough to guide his steps forward. At night, Takeshi walked the narrow lanes, the lanterns swaying in the wind. He thought of the temptations he had resisted, the dangers he had seen, and the kindness he had received. The city was a mirror of the Ronin's own heart, part hunger, part pride, part shadow, part light. To survive here was to walk a blade's edge, never tipping too far toward despair or corruption. After weeks in the town, Takeshi chose to move on. The noise, the crowds, the endless push of coin and desire. It threatened to drown him. He left with little more than when he entered, yet he carried something more valuable. The knowledge that survival was not only about hunger and cold, it was about choices. A Ronin could be swallowed by the city's shadows, or he could walk through them without losing himself. Takeshi chose the latter. As he passed beyond the gates, the fields opened once more before him. He breathed deeply, the air cleaner, the horizon wider. The road stretched on, uncertain yet steady. In the city, he had seen the worst of men and the best. He had faced temptation, danger, and loneliness. And still, he walked forward. The Ronin's path was not chosen once. It was chosen every day, with every step. And so Takeshi continued, one step at a time. Chapter 8. Toward an Ending. Acceptance and the Ronin's Quiet Legacy. The years stretched like the road itself, long, winding, unmarked. For a Ronin, time was not measured in victories or promotions, but in footsteps, in seasons endured, and in the memories carried like quiet stones. Takeshi's journey was not toward wealth, nor toward recognition. It was toward acceptance. As age crept upon him, Takeshi noticed the changes. His hair silvered at the temples, his steps slowed. The once sharp edge of his sword dulled more quickly, and his arms tired faster when he trained. Yet with age came a new kind of strength. He no longer sought duels, nor felt the need to prove himself at every turn. His battles had been fought, some with steel, most with hunger, cold, and solitude. In the villages he passed, children no longer stared at him in awe or fear. They saw instead a weary traveler, perhaps a storyteller, perhaps just another pilgrim. And in truth, that was what he had become. In one village he stayed through a harvest, helping peasants cut rice under the autumn sun. His hands, though trained for the sword, adapted to the sickle. At night he sat with the farmers, eating the same simple meals, listening to their songs. They asked little about his past. In their eyes, he was useful, respectful, and kind. That was enough. In another place, he mended sandals for travelers, sharing tricks he had learned on the road. He sharpened blades for farmers, not warriors. He taught a few boys how to balance a staff, but always with the reminder that true skill lay in restraint. The Ronin had once lived by the sword. Now, he lived by his hands and his patience. With age came memory, and with memory, story. Around fires or in temples, villagers sometimes asked him to tell of battles, of lords, of what it meant to serve. He spoke softly, never glorifying blood. He told instead of loyalty, of choices, of the cost of pride. He told of monks who gave food, of peasants who shared shelter, of musicians whose songs outlasted steel. And when children begged for tales of monsters and spirits, he obliged, smiling as they gasped and clutched at each other. Story became his legacy, more enduring than any victory he had once sought. Late in life, Takeshi reached the sea. For years he had walked the land, but here the horizon stretched endless, water meeting sky. The waves roared and gulls wheeled overhead. He sat upon the sand, watching the tide roll in and out. He thought of his lord, long gone. He thought of comrades who had fallen. He thought of the countless faces he had met, some kind, some cruel, all of them part of his path. The sea seemed to say what no man could, that all things flowed, all things returned, and all things were carried onward. Takeshi came to understand that his life, though marked by loss, was not wasted. He had not built castles, nor written great works, nor left behind heirs. Yet he had walked, endured, and learned. In Japan, many Ronin had turned to crime, to despair, or to nothingness. He had chosen another road, one of persistence, humility, and quiet dignity. Acceptance did not mean surrender. It meant carrying his life as it was, without shame, without bitterness. In the end, Takeshi's legacy was not carved in stone. It was not recorded in chronicles. It lived instead in the memories of those he had touched. The peasant family who remembered the traveler who chopped their firewood. The apprentice who remembered the old man who corrected his stance. The widow who remembered the stranger who bowed with respect. The monks who remembered the Ronin who carried prayer beads down the road. His story survived not in fame, but in kindness. Not in monuments, but in moments. As the sun set over the sea, Takeshi whispered a prayer, though not to any particular god. It was a prayer of gratitude for the road, for the lessons, for the endurance that had carried him to this moment. He closed his eyes, the sound of the waves like the chanting of monks, steady, eternal. His sword lay at his side, no longer a weapon, but a companion, a reminder of the path he had walked. And as the stars appeared, he accepted what he had always sought, peace. The journey of the Ronin was never a straight road. It curved through hunger, through cold, through city shadows and temple light. It was a path shaped by hardship, but also by fleeting kindness. The bowl of rice from a stranger, the prayer beads from a monk, the laughter of children in distant villages. Takeshi's story, though imagined here, mirrors the truth of many masterless men in Japan's past. History tells us that the Ronin were feared, pitied, sometimes despised. Yet behind every name was a human being. A man stripped of status, but still walking. A man without a master, but not without choices. As we have followed him, step by step, we have seen what it meant to endure, to live without glory, but with dignity, to accept loneliness, but still greet others with respect, to hold a sword, but to know its greatest strength lay in restraint. For the Ronin, survival was its own act of honor. Not the clash of armies, not the shouts of lords, but the quiet persistence of each dawn rising after another weary night. Perhaps that is why this story soothes us now. Because in every life there are roads that feel uncertain, seasons that feel harsh, and burdens carried in silence. And yet, like Takeshi, we walk forward, we endure. We find meaning not in what is given to us, but in how we choose to step through the world. So, as the tale closes, imagine once more the Ronin resting by the sea, his sword at his side, his gaze upon the stars, the tide moving in and out, steady, eternal. He does not wait for recognition. He does not cling to regret. He breathes, he accepts, he rests. And as you listen, let his rest become your own. Let the rhythm of his footsteps fade into the rhythm of your breath. Let the weight of his journey soften the weight you carry. For tonight, there are no lords to serve, no battles to fight, no hunger to endure. There is only quiet, only the steady tide of sleep. Close your eyes now. Drift gently as the Ronin drifts into the vastness of night. The road continues, but for now, it carries you to dreams. Good night.